Hey everybody, welcome back to the Firefighters podcast. Here is what we have got in store for you today.
It was such a macho thing to be a firefighter and run into a fire without your tunic done up and all these things.
It's that imposter syndrome. I've been in the fire service for 18 years, but my rank is crew manager, and there I am with commissioners and area managers and group managers. You know, it's not about the rank that you are, it's about the person that you are.
I can remember standing beside my colleague who was wearing the same rank markings as me. I'd just arrived at the Fire Service College as Station Commander. An old colleague of mine came over to me and went, "Hey, what are you doing here? We are wearing Fire Service College uniform." And he said, "Oh, is this your boss?" Then he looked at his rank markings and then he sort of went, okay, right, bye then, lovely to see you, and had just assumed. But I also think that there was something about me that said, I am an imposter.
You know, when I first joined the fire service, I wasn't someone who stepped forward into the limelight. I wasn't somebody who would have stood up and rallied against anything, because at the time there were so few women in London. I think there were probably about 50 women out of 9,000 firefighters. Lots of men were obviously not very supportive of the idea of women meeting together and we were going to have some sort of secret. And interestingly, when they first set it up, you had to have a man present. I changed in a locker room full of men with no curtains. It was just a locker room full of men and I had a locker. So there was no segregation, no separation when I first joined.
Firefighter is not gender specific, and we are not all men or all women. And if we want to be truly inclusive, firefighter is a role and anyone can be it.
That's right, if you haven't guessed it, we are celebrating International Women's Day, and how better to do it but hand the podcast over to the very competent and very powerful voices of women in the fire service. This is actually something I'm really excited to be doing because, you know, it's called the Firefighters podcast. It is not the Pete podcast or anything like that. And it's really important to me that we empower people and give them a platform to speak about the things that they are most passionate about. And we really are joined by 5 of some of the most influential, brave, inspiring women in the fire service who are really stepping hard on the gas and trying to encourage that consistent change and awareness through the work that's done in women in the fire service and the value that it adds to so many incredible people within our emergency services. Before we jump in there and see who we've got in store for today, I just want to reference our partners that are supporting today's podcast. And first up is the wonderful Wollingwood watches. Now, as I'm sure you're all already aware, Wollingwood watches are the creators of those beautifully crafted British luxury watches made from upcycled firefighting equipment. But in keeping with the theme of today's episode, Wollingwood watches are doing something really exciting at the minute, and it has come at such an incredible time. They are putting together some of the first ever Wollingwood watches specifically designed for women. So they are really early in the creation process of this, and they want your input. So if you go into the notes below, you will see a link to Wollingwood Watches website to voice your opinion about what you enjoy most about Wollingwood Watches, and also what you would like to see in their women's range of watches, which will hopefully be coming out in the not too distant future. Secondly, consistently with the theme of adding value to the listener, we have got our 2 competitions running again. It is the beginning of March. We have got another monthly giveaway from Hikes, who are the leading manufacturer of functional shoes for departments of police, military, and of course the fire service. You can get your hands on a pair of Hikes Adventure GTX by heading over to our Instagram or Facebook pages and entering yourself into the competition. We don't need an email address, we don't need any funny business, we just need you to tag a fellow firefighter in the link in the comments below. And also in conjunction with Tallyman, you can get your hands on 2 personalised breathing apparatus tallies with your own name on them, with whatever specifics you want. Stick them on your bag, stick them on your keys. You can get them as part of our monthly giveaway as well. So head over to our social media channels to be in with a chance to win. And a final request just from me whilst you are listening on today's podcast, please take a second to hit that subscribe and or follow button. We use this as an important indicator as to the success of each episode. So if you're enjoying today's episode, please go on and hit that. It really helps us out and it really helps all of our guests. So with that boxed off, it's my absolute pleasure to hand it over to Sarah Hall, who is going to be our host for today. So without further ado, if you're sitting comfortably, let's buckle up for safety, and I will see you all on the other side.
Hello and welcome to the Firefighter podcast. This week, hosted by myself, Sarah Hall from Women in the Fire Service. I'm chatting to a couple of my colleagues from Women in the Fire Service about the subjects and topics that are interesting us the most at the moment. So can I ask for some introductions, please?
Morning, Sarah. So my name's Jules. I work in East Sussex Fire and Rescue Service. I'm an area manager. I have the responsibility for people services, and also proud to say that I'm the chair of Women in the Fire Service and been in and around Women in the Fire Service for the last 20 years or so.
Fantastic. Good morning, Sarah. Nicola Lone. I work for the London Fire Brigade. I'm a group commander in training and professional development there. I also am very proud to say that I am one of the directors of WFS. I'm also the secretary to the Women's Commission of CTIF, which is an international fire and rescue organisation. I've been involved in WFS for nearly my whole career, which is just around 27 years. I knew about it at the start, got involved very soon, and then things have just grown from there.
Okay, so, I mean, I know you two have been involved with WFS from pretty much the very beginning. Where did it come from?
I remember, so I think Nick and I have done almost an identical amount of service. So I'm in my 28th year. And I remember in 1996 was the first training and development, or it was a conference then at the Fire Service College. And I remember getting a letter, as all women firefighters did in East Sussex. And it was you will attend this event. And I still remember it to this day, being in for those who've been to the Fire Service College lecture theatre that hosts, possibly 300 people. And we were all gathered there. And I just simply didn't know there were so many women who were in the fire service. Mostly, women firefighters was the first angle for the conference. And I just remember being so completely overwhelmed by all these wonderful women, because in East Sussex, when I joined, there was just one other woman. And so that's where it all started. And I know, others that have gone before us, were the reason why women in the fire service were set up in the early 90s for women, by women, and has inspired so many people along the way.
Nick, how did you get involved?
I remember that exact conference as well. I joined the fire service in 1995. And I'd gone out to my station, and I can remember the conference being advertised, and it was at that point NWFS, Networking Women in the Fire Service. I can remember going into my governor and saying, "Do you think I could attend this?" And he's like, "Well, I'm not sure really." And then I suggested it to my watch with my governor, saying, "Well, why don't you ask them about it?" And they're all like, "Women there." So I was a bit, I wish I hadn't asked really, but I still went. And I got there, and again, so when I joined, I think there was something like 6,000 firefighters in London, and 60 of us were women. So I'd seen a couple of women at training school, but hadn't really seen many out and about when I was at incidents. And then I went there and was like pretty much blown away, really, by the number of people. And I just remember all those really important people that I saw there who were speaking, like Brenda Berkman from New York Fire Department. And I remember that I went there, and Fleur Lombard had died earlier in the year in Avon at a fire there. So all of these things, it was all very passionate, but exciting and a little bit strange, but very, very supportive and very lovely.
My experience was, I'm a whippersnapper compared to you two. I've only got the 16 years. I joined in 2006 at Westmid, and I'd gone through my training, and I was on my first station, and it wasn't as impassioned as you guys. I had a phone call from some friends of mine who were firefighters in West Wales, and they said, "We're going to this weekend at the Fire Service College, especially for women. Are you coming?" And I'd never heard of this event. There had been absolutely no publicity at all about it in Westmid. So I went to my gaffer and said, "What about this?" To which, obviously, his panic just crossed his face. He said, "Speak to Training Centre." So I spoke to Training Centre, and they said, "Never heard of it. We don't spend money on that. We go to Equality and Diversity." Went to Equality and Diversity. He said, "Oh, no, that's not us." And I remember just thinking, well, that's it. That's not something that we do. That's not something that's okay for me to ask. But I had a new station commander who came in to my station, and he sort of sat us all down and had a little chat about, hopes, dreams, aspirations. And there I am as a 6-month firefighter who said, "So is there anything in particular you want to do?" Or just out of nowhere, I said, "Oh, actually, there's this event that my friends are going to that looks great, and I'd like to go." And that was it. He's like, "Right, we're going to put together a business case. We're going to take it to a principal officer." And that's how we got funding to start going. And it was an interesting, really interesting project, because I could absolutely see the value of it, but I had to really fight for people to listen to me. And as soon as principal officers were listening, it was easy But at that sort of watch level, it was very difficult to sort of explain that, yes, I want to go and see this event that's for women, but it's not because I'm unhappy. It's not because, I'm struggling. It's just because this is a peer group that I might not have the opportunity to access again.
I think we've got Caroline there, haven't we?
There
she is.
Hi now. Hello.
Are you driving and podcasting at the same time?
No, I'm not driving, but I am in my car.
Hello, Caroline.
Hi, Sarah. How are you doing?
Yeah, good, thanks. We're just going around, just sort of talking about how we got involved in Women in the Fire Service. Are you ready to jump in with your story?
Yeah, if you like. For me, I applied for a secondment as a project officer in the Equality and Diversity team in 2010 in Devon and Somerset Fire and Rescue Service, and I managed to get the position, and it was part of my role to attend the NWFS Training and Development event at Tyne and Wear, which I didn't know anything about, and I was a little bit gutted, to be honest, because it fell on my son's 21st birthday weekend. But as it turned out, I flew up with 3 ladies that I'd never met before who were amazing, was instantly just completely bowled over with the positivity and the motivation and the fabulousness of all these women from different fire and rescue services. So by the end of the weekend, by the time I was getting on the flight to go home to my son's 21st birthday, I thought, that's it, I'm in. And I managed to get back with 2 hours to spare of his birthday because the snow held us up at the airport in Newcastle. But yeah, no, and from then on, I couldn't let it leave. Just had to get involved.
True dedication. I think that leads me on to sort of asking the value of a peer group. For me, I feel it's something that you may not appreciate it. If you've always worked in an environment where you see people like you in that environment, you perhaps don't understand how you can feel very other if you've never seen that in your workplace. And that is something that we are provided with from Women in the Fire Service and the events. And it's not about us feeling uncomfortable in our day-to-day position, but it's such a great feeling to walk into a room and almost just blend in, because everyone else in there is not exactly like you. They're all individuals, but that real peer group sort of support, listening to what people are achieving, how they're achieving it. And it's that very basic for me. Well, they can do it. Maybe I can do it. What you can see, you can do. What does everybody else think?
I think you're completely right. And I look at the people in front of me here that have been there as stalwarts throughout my career. And I think possibly without that connection and without those friendships, things would have been much more difficult for me. Would I still be in the fire service? I don't know. But it certainly has helped me. And I've seen, those people getting rank and getting positions and just maybe not even aspiring myself, but just being so pleased and so proud of them. And Sarah, I've watched you and your tenacity, and now you're a station commander, and that's absolutely brilliant. I'm just so proud of you, having got there. And tenacity is an enormous part of it, I think, and actually just having people that you can go and approach and trust, and have those friendships there as well.
Yes, I'd say it's tenacity stroke stubbornness. I think they're both quite
and you've got those in buckets.
Yes. Jules?
I think for me, some of the things I love about Women in the Fire Service is the informal coaching and mentoring that we do on a regular basis, and how I'm meeting with someone, I'm having a phone conversation with someone in the next couple of days because they are thinking about applying for an area manager's position. And it's really lovely that they've thought to contact me, having recently gone through a similar process. And I think it's wonderful because we don't always have those people, like Sarah, you say, you walk into a room and there's lots of like-minded people. Often when we're out in our services, we don't always see them. But through Women in the Fire Service, we know they're there. And through our Facebook group and our WhatsApp group and, other forums, we know that people are there. And it's lovely that people can reach out to me, as I know others have reached out to you all. And as I have reached out to others to offer some, get some support and some guidance. And I think that's one of the biggest strengths of women in the fire service, is that it doesn't matter where you are and what position you are in. You don't have to look very far to find somebody to talk to share a thought with, just to get some support. I just think it's wonderful.
Caroline, have you got anything to add to that?
Yeah, I guess as vice chair, I've always been it's that imposter syndrome. I've been in the fire service for 18 years, but my rank is crew manager, and there I am on the committee with commissioners and area managers and group managers and station managers, and I'm just a little crew manager. But, many times, I've raised my fears, but every time I have, everybody stood around me and kind of lifted me up onto they've been my scaffold, if you like, and said, it's not about the rank that you are, it's about the person that you are and what you bring to the team and the support that you give and the enthusiasm that you have. And so it is about teamwork, and it is about working together, which is why I love the fire and rescue service so much. It is about working together, and it really doesn't matter that I'm lower down the ranks, if you like. It's just that's partly my choice, partly my circumstances, but aspiring to you all and watching you all and, the fabulous leaders that you are and that we all are, in our little ways. I've always found it really exciting and lovely to have that warmth and that camaraderie within our fabulous little organisation. I love it.
I went to the first Women in the Fire Service, well, it was Networking Women in the Fire Service event at the Fire Service College, without any idea of what value it would bring to me. I liked my job. I had worked previously in incredibly male-dominated industries. I'd worked in kitchens as a chef. I'd worked in exhibition building, traveling around building exhibitions, all of which, I rarely worked with other women. And so, when I expressed that interest in going, it wasn't a terribly deep thought other than, wow, my friends are going. That sounds great. And I got benefits from it I could have never have imagined that I would have got. I didn't necessarily think, I need lots of support, but that natural support was just amazing. And just to walk into that room and feel totally accepted, because I think there's no point of beating around the bush. The fire service has come along a long way, but I bet most of us in this room have, at one point or another, have basically been told we shouldn't be doing this job purely based on our gender, not on our performance, not on how we present ourselves, but because why would a woman want to do that job? Now, I'm happy to say it's been quite a long time since someone said it to my face, but definitely in the early days, I think I've probably heard it quite a while. And although you have to be resilient to be in the fire service, I think it's been so important. Would I have stayed in the fire service as long as I have, had it not been for this support? I don't know. I really don't. But I'm sure I'm a lot happier because I do have it.
I think the support's really immeasurable. You couldn't go out and do statistics on it at all or gather data. It is immeasurable, but it is irreplaceable as well.
Yeah, absolutely. The closest thing that I did get to measuring the support was I used the statistics in my old service of the link between women attending a Women in the Fire Service event and then going for future promotion, and it was significantly higher. So that for me was about, because of course we're all in fire services with limited budgets, and we're always having to prove why we should be spending the money here, what the value is to the service. And I thought it was really interesting that maybe it was women who were already interested in promotion who attended, or maybe going, really gave them that sense of, look around me, look at all these people who I can aspire to be, but also they're not otherworldly, they're the same as me. Why can't I do this?
Yeah, I think you're right. I remember we've had a couple of case studies, I suppose, of people's experience at the training and development event, not least someone who came as a delegate and then the next year, realising actually there was an opportunity to perhaps become an instructor at the Fire Service College, which they then went on to do and then continued to support women in the fire service. And also, although, we focus a lot around the delegates and what people get from the training and development event, it's also about our volunteer instructors as well. So again, I know there's a couple of firefighters that have come along as delegates, and then over the time they think, oh, actually, I've now become a breathing apparatus instructor or something, and I'd like to give something back. And then they attend as an instructor, and then they can look back and see the firefighters that they were, and in the future those firefighters might then become the instructors. And the whole thing of as you develop through your career, and it's not always about promotion, it's not always vertically, although I'll refer to the ladder, but just as you go on your journey, just looking back behind you all the time and just pulling the ladder and bringing all those people with you that's just the most inspiring part of it for me.
Certainly at the start of my career, the thing I was most excited about going on the development events was to go to the Fire Service College and wear BA and be absolutely beasted, and then be sitting there steaming with a bright red face after having gone into the sub basement. And, it was fantastic. And then you just go and do it again in a couple of hours' time. And, that excitement. And the first time I ever took charge of a team, a crew and an appliance, was at the Fire Service College on one of those events, out on the fire ground. Right, you're going to be the next officer in charge, and you're going to arrive and you're going to make some decisions about this, and you're going to direct people. And it was like, oh my word, how am I going to do this? And then you do it and you get your feedback and you think, yeah, I can do this. And I think it certainly gave me an idea that to go for my crew managers, as it was at the time, leading firefighters. So, and just those little incremental steps. And then public speaking, we'd have workshops on that. And then, of course, I would go to these mostly at the Fire Service College, some, regional events. And I ended up applying to be an instructor for 3 years for a secondment at the Fire Service College. And as Caroline said earlier on, there was a bit of imposter syndrome there. I can remember standing beside my colleague who was wearing the same rank markings as me. I'd just arrived at the Fire Service College as station commander, and he's wearing the same. He's probably 6 inches taller than me, and an old colleague of mine came over to me and went, "Hey, what are you doing here? Were you wearing Fire Service College uniform?" I'm like, yeah, I've just arrived as an instructor. And he said, "Oh, is this your boss?" And the guy, then he looked at his rank markings, and then he sort of went, okay, right, bye then, lovely to see you, and snuck off, and had just assumed. But I also think that there was something about me that said, I am an imposter, and there was this aura. So from that, I learned sometimes you just have to put your shoulders back, fill your clothes, and, fill those rank markings, and then just go forward, because I think probably everybody feels like that at some time or another.
I was going to say fake it until you make it, but actually that's not true, because we're not faking it. It's just about just keep doing it until you actually recognise that, yeah, that's me, and I am totally right in what I'm delivering here. So 7% of firefighters in the UK female. It sounds like over the last 20 years there's been lots and lots of changes. I mean, we don't know how much money has been spent on positive action, which is where extra time or effort or money can be spent on attracting a certain minority group to apply for a role. So that has been part of the fire service for 25 years. We're still 7% female firefighters. I saw a really interesting statistic last year when I was researching something, that there are a higher percentage of armed female police officers in the Met than there is female firefighters. And I just, for me, that I think is just quite a stark reality, because obviously people say, well, perhaps women don't want those jobs. Why is it that we're still struggling to attract women to the role of firefighter?
I've got a couple of views on it. I suppose probably the most significant thing for me is, for a good period of time, maybe 8 to 10 years, that there just was no new recruitment in firefighters across the country. And so whilst I feel that there's been some real progress made on positive action, throughout ongoing recruitment in probably every fire and rescue service. I think it will just take a longer period of time, because for those periods of time, and I think actually there might have even been a small increase in the number of women firefighters, but that wasn't because we were recruiting any. It was because those that were retiring were our male colleagues. And so I think, we've probably got to, recognise that for not recruiting for such a long time, we haven't been able to change the percentage representation across the country. But I think for me, so many things start off so young, and I'm sure we all do it, but you go into schools and engage with really young people, and so often people are surprised that women are firefighters. I looked online earlier, just put in the search engine "women in the fire service," and it asks people also ask, and the first question is, can women be firefighters? And we have been, women firefighters have been serving for many, many, many years. But I just think there's education to do around our community, because so many people don't really appreciate the range of roles that the fire and rescue service do, because most people only need the fire service in an emergency. So I think educating our school children, certainly educating our community, and I think the more that we can do collectively across the country and wider around positive action and how we can continue to be role models. It's so important for us all to be visual, because visibility really, really does count. And I think you mentioned it earlier, Sarah, which is something I refer to so much, which is if she can see it, she can be it. And so I think visibility is really key.
Definitely. As a recruitment officer for the service, Devon and Somerset, I go to many, many schools, obviously not over the last little while because of COVID, but whenever I've gone in and you're in the big sports hall and you've got all these young students going around, I will always try and catch the eye of a bunch of girls and get them to come over and engage in conversation. And as soon as you say to them, what percentage of women firefighters do you think we have? And they come up with 40%, 50%, 35%. Because when they see the red truck go past and they've got the helmets on and the PPE and everything, you really have no idea what gender they are behind that uniform. And then when you say to them, well, it's 7%, and they're horrified, absolutely horrified. The girls that I chat to, they're absolutely horrified. Right, that's it. I'm going to be a firefighter. Yes, fantastic. And it's not just about, and if it's not something that you fancy doing, as you said, Jules, there's many, 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 many other jobs. Corporate, our fire and rescue services are big corporate organisations, multi-million-pound organisations that, lots of staff that support the firefighters that go out, and so there's plenty of other roles. But I think it is down to education, and I think it is down to national education program. We often see things on the news for police. Don't often see things for fire and rescue services. So yeah, and being really positive role models, because it can be tough. Do have to be able to do the same as the men, with all the strength and fitness expectations that are in the service. But we've got 5'3" firefighters that are 50 kilos that absolutely do it because they're so determined. They will put that extra effort in, and so you can see it. You can absolutely be it. You just got to get on and put the work in. Yeah, I echo what you say there, Jules.
I think also for me is sometimes how the fire and rescue services is described within like news articles and the media, that there is still so much reference to 50 firemen saved this building and firemen this. And I think, language is so important. And if younger generations just hear the word fireman, that, subconsciously that they will be, their brains will be absorbing, this is not a role that I can be doing. And I know that collectively women in the fire service work really hard to try and break down those stereotypes that firefighters are all men, and it's so important to challenge that language. And one thing that I find really inspiring is when it's not the women that correct the language, when it's the men that correct the language, because we haven't used the term fireman in the UK Fire and Rescue Service for over 30 years. And yet I would probably say I hear it nearly every day.
It's strange, isn't it? It's just not something that I'm used to using. I was always firefighter, or, when I joined, that was my rank, and the contract said firefighter. So it is perpetuated, and I'm not sure why. And you can say it as much as you want. I know that we write to newspapers, we write to the BBC. They're pretty dreadful about their terminology, just generally, and that just plods on. But we must plod on after it and gallop past it and then stop it. That's what we must do. And I also think you were talking about fitness, Caroline. You know what? The women who are doing the Antarctic Fire Angels, they are absolutely phenomenal. And they are so fit and so strong and so tenacious. And, they're going to be doing their challenge across Antarctica. And it's going to be amazing. And I think that they are certainly blazing the way for just showing what women can do and being those role models.
The term fireman, I get asked a lot. As I say, times are changing. People are accepting new ways of speaking. But what's the problem with the term fireman? Can we say postman? Can we say postwomen? I get asked this a lot, and historically, it brings up all the other sort of terminology we use. Well, if I describe myself as a postman or a postwoman, I said, I'm a postwoman, you would know what I did as a job. If I said I was a bin man, you would know what that person did. When I describe myself as a firewoman, you would have no clue what my role was, what I did. When I describe myself as a firefighter, people have generally, who don't know me, have said, what? So you go and put out the fires. So it's not even really in the consciousness that describing myself in that sort of neutral role of I'm a firefighter, that actually that's what my role is. The term firewoman doesn't mean anything to anybody. Maybe if it does, maybe if you get to a point where you can say, yeah, just exactly like I'm a postman or a postwoman, that people say, oh yeah, I know what your job is. And perhaps it won't be a problem, but right now it is.
I think it's broader than that as well, because firefighter is not gender specific, and we are not all men or all women. And if we want to be truly inclusive, a role that does not include a gender identity. So like you say, firefighter is a role and anyone can be it. I think, that's really important for me.
It's quite bizarre, isn't it, that in 2022 we're still having discussions about the terminology of our role, but it's still there. I'm sure it will. It's not going away anytime soon.
And I think the language as well, in describing an operational incident, for example, and someone might use the term firefighter, but then when we talk about, then the driver did so and so, and then it probably slips to he, or the officer in charge, an assumption that it's he, and it's just so easy to use they, because it's not gender specific and it relates to everybody, and everybody feels included. And that's just something really quite simple to be able to just, remind people it doesn't have to be gender specific. And some of us are really, really good at it, but they work for me.
So what are the subjects that we are still addressing in Women in the Fire Service? What are the key issues that our members come to us, that services come to us about, that we can most contribute in the modern UK fire and rescue services?
One of the really simple ones, which has been a thread throughout my whole career, is uniform. Why do firefighters who are women not get uniform that fits them properly? It is just bizarre, and I think it's a thread that just comes round and round and round. I absolutely love the fact that we have PPE, personal protective equipment, that fits everybody. I think that we have 27, maybe even 29 sizes of PPE, leggings and tunics, all ranges, and they're specifically made for men and for women, for the protection of different shaped bodies, different styles, the breeches to hold up your leggings so that, they're spaced at the side so that they don't rub at the front, because women have breasts and men don't. So all of those things. So the PPE, certainly in the UK, has been sorted. I know it hasn't been internationally, but, it is out there and it is available whether you take it on board or not. But workwear just seems to be very, very difficult. And I kind of think of Marks and Spencer's, and they sort of manage to get different sizes and cater for all sizes. So I'm just not sure that it's right up there to make sure that, women who are firefighters have got proper uniform.
Do you think some of it is because a lot of the workwear is unisex? And I think when you try to do something that fits everybody, you only ever really make it fit for the majority. And the majority happen to be men. That said, my current workwear trousers fit okay. I'm not at work to be fashionable. It's there to be practical. But actually my new trousers they've all got them. They've got these elasticated waists to allow a greater range of fit. And actually they fit really nicely in certain times of the year. They're really useful to have the elasticated fit in them.
Good winter trousers to wear.
but I know, but generally they do just look better on my male colleagues than the women. But yeah, it is something that's really difficult that, as you say, Nick, other retailers are able to provide clothes for men.
Other retailers are available, yeah.
Yeah. So it's a mystery. I don't quite know, but it has been an issue for a long time.
I'm pretty sure I have never been in a women's meeting through the two services I've worked in, through Women in the Fire Service, where there hasn't been an agenda item on either PPE or workwear. The most recent one, which we had a bit of success in my service, was the surcoats, so the jackets, the tabards, because they were all in one size, which seemed to be extra large. So we had a couple of station commanders who were under 5'3", and they looked like little kids wearing their dad's jacket to work when they were in charge of an incident. So so something as simple as that is seen as a bit of a small victory.
I was just going to say that one positive thing is, though, that there's many positive things, but one particularly positive thing is that we are being invited as Women in the Fire Service, as the organisation, to be involved in conversations with manufacturers to try and improve, to discuss the issues and to try and improve things for our women firefighters. So it's really nice that we're being acknowledged and people are trying to understand the issues so that we can move forward for all service personnel, which I think is a really positive thing.
So leading on from workwear and PPE, what about facilities? Is that still something that we are regularly being asked to contribute on?
I can only comment on discussions I have with other women and with my fire and rescue service. And we certainly have facilities at all of our workplaces, all of our fire stations. Some of them aren't ideal because a lot of our fire stations are, traditionally built and there is only a certain amount of size. And so there is only so much you can do. But I think in East Sussex, there are a number of improvement projects that are being progressed at the moment, and they are all considering appropriate facilities. But that said, what if there were to be a sudden change in the 7% of operational women firefighters? If there was a sudden jump, I'm not sure how quickly we would be able to adapt to, a rapid increase in the number of women firefighters.
That adaptation, though, does improve everybody's circumstances. So if you have individual showers, individual loos, spaces that you can be separate, I think that everybody is happier with that, and not just some. Definitely. And then anybody can use it. So maybe gender-specific areas, they are important. For example, maybe locker rooms or something like that. But actually gender-specific showers and loos, etc. Of course, there's always the issue about keeping them clean and that respect part of it when people are using it. But certainly look at every individual and consider how privacy is actually very important for everyone and not just women. But not easy to do if you have an old stock of fire stations. We've got Victorian fire stations, the amount of money to be spent on them to get them up to scratch would be, prohibitive, really. So you have to be reasonable about it, but certainly looking in the future and for new fire stations, individual privacy is the way forward.
And I think we sit in quite a position of privilege in this group. I mean, I know that we're all in quite forward-thinking services, and many of us actually have influence over those decisions that are made. But there are many of our members who are potentially quite isolated within their service, who are unaware of what they can ask for, who they can go to, and just want to feel like they're fitting in. And I think that is such a powerful influencer in the fire service, is that sense of I fit in. And I think particularly as a woman or somebody who has an obvious difference about them, it can be an overwhelming fear that if I say what I want, I'm going to look like I'm a trouble causer, that I don't like it, that I want things to be special for me. And over the years, I've met so many women who have come to Women in the Fire Service events almost reluctantly, almost being sort of encouraged, to use the most diplomatic word, to go, and have come away suddenly realising that I think my life at work could have been so much better if I knew that I could have had this structure of support and of understanding what it is that it's okay for me to ask for at work.
Yeah, I think that's really important, and I suppose in some ways it links to the theme of International Women's Day, which is break the bias, isn't it? Because I certainly recall being just wanting to fit in. I didn't want to stand out. I'd probably refer to myself as being one of the boys, and trying to feel that you are in a workplace, in a world where, your individual difference is really valued and celebrated, because that's what International Women's Day is seeking to, we are all individuals. We've all got difference. We're talking about women in the fire service here, but, there's so many people that have diversity of thought, people who are neurodiverse, people from our LGBT community. We all have something individual to, and our difference should absolutely be celebrated. And in society, it doesn't always feel that way. And sometimes it is easier to just feel like you fit in. But I think there are many of us through Women in the Fire Service that dare to be different and are better for it, 100%.
I think it's also really important that, if you're trying hard to fit in and you're not being yourself and you're not being authentic and you're not being the best person you can be. And so having improved facilities so that you do really feel like you're part of everything is really important, because you can just relax and just be yourself a little more.
Hi everybody, I'd love to jump in and just ask a few sort of clarifying questions. There's been some incredible stuff that I feel like I've really swam in the depth of that conversation, but there's some couple of things I really would love to just double click on. You've all spoken about some really interesting subjects. I'd love to just start with yourself, Jules, if I could. Networking for Women in the Fire Service, it changed then to Women in the Fire Service. What was the name change at that point in time? Do we know because I feel like networking, I mean, in a business sense, sometimes it's given a bit of a bad rap and some people don't feel there's value in it, but I still feel that's a massive part of what women in the fire service is, from the people that I speak to that take value from it. Why was the name changed? Do we know?
Networking Women in the Fire Service was 100% the original name, and was really good for a number of years. The conversation started around the value of the word network, and of course networking is so very important, but we felt that perhaps by having it as Networking Women in the Fire Service, perhaps it could be considered as being maybe one-dimensional, and that was all that we were involved in, networking. And certainly over the last 10 to 15 years, there's been a much more focus around training and development and professional support and coaching. And so we felt that by removing the networking part and becoming women in the fire service and focus more around our values and our commitment, so our Women in the Fire Service stand for working together, future focused, sharing strengths, trying to focus on just a broader range than just networking.
I love that. Yeah, no, that really speaks to a couple of things that a few of you have mentioned as well, in about it being development from a lateral perspective as well, not just a vertical for those that aren't necessarily seeking promotion. Because I'd hate for people to see it and go, oh, but I'm not interested in promotion, therefore it must add no value to me. Because of course, that's only it's a significant part, but it's only a very small part of what you do. Would I right in saying that? Yeah,
absolutely. And I think you're right. Everybody should be able to feel that they can develop and grow and be the best versions of themselves. And it doesn't matter what role that you do. And we've spoken, a lot about the firefighting aspect of the fire service today. But, 38% of women who work in the fire and rescue service are part-time workers. Okay. And a large proportion of our women work in those roles that are not from a firefighting background. And they are so important, and their development is so very important. I think Caroline mentioned it, that there are so many roles within the fire and rescue service. It's not just firefighting.
Sarah, you mentioned something really significant about when you first looked at attending one of the seminars. You said it wasn't recognised as a course, it wasn't training. But you obviously wanted to go. You had a drive to do it, but it sounded like a very jarring experience to try and reach out to it. And some people only need to be told no once, or, have one barrier to get over to put them off doing this sort of stuff. So for people that want to reach out to it and they have an interest in being part of Women in the Fire Service, or at least just experiencing their first interaction of it, where do we see it sitting now? Of course it's professional development, but as we sort of spoke about there, Jules, it's personal development as well. So people shouldn't have to feel they need to justify why they want to attend these sorts of things and enrich themselves and develop themselves. Where do you feel it sits, though, Sarah, within an organisation's obligations? Is it welfare? Is it personal development? Is it professional development? Where does it sit?
Well, we're very lucky in the sort of 16 years since then. Obviously we've got Danny Cotton, who is incredibly influential. We've got Alex Johnson, Chief of South Yorkshire, incredibly influential. And we've seen like a real sea change in the attitude of principal officers. They're really sort of getting on board. We know they're the easiest people to talk to. It's how it filters down through services and getting to that sort of station level to make people understand. And it's not just about women in the fire service. It's about, as Jules was saying, about the huge array of diversity we actually have within our services, that it's okay to say that you want something. And that is changing slowly. But yeah, I really see that the most powerful thing has been that sort of trickle down from the principal officers disseminating to the station commanders, down to the watches, that actually people have an absolute right to be as developed as they can be, as happy as they can be at work. And if somebody comes to you and says, I think this might benefit me and make me more confident in my role, why on earth would you try and stop that?
So, I sincerely hope that listening to this podcast, it's not the first time people have heard of Women in the Fire Service. But just to clarify, women should be supported to be able to attend these types of venues and these types of sort of seminars and stuff within their work time, shouldn't they? This is not something that they have to try and carve out an abundance of time in their personal life. They it's great if they want to do that as well, but they should be getting support from their service, from the line manager, from their team to be able to facilitate that without them having to make an additional personal sacrifice. Would I be right in saying that?
Of course, yeah, because if we sort of limit it down, we're going to reduce the number of people who are actually able to come to our events. Some people don't have a huge amount of personal time outside of their work hours. And we definitely don't want people to be out of pocket because, again, that's a small proportion of people who will be able to finance things like that. And services do recognise that this is a really valuable part of people's development. And also, it's not exclusively women who attend our development events. We also support male colleagues or colleagues of however they identify, because we want as many allies as we want people that we develop. We want people to be to really come. And I know so many male colleagues who have attended who have got something out of it that they never thought they would, which is an understanding of feeling slightly other in a workplace.
Yeah.
Because many of the firefighters I've worked with have never worked outside of the traditional role where they walk into a room and although they may have their own diversity, they appear to be part of the gang. And so to put them in, and so they go into that situation where they walk into a room and suddenly feel like, oh, I'm the one here. Am I phrasing this right? Am I presenting myself right in this group that I'm not used to professionally being amongst? And I think that's been a really fascinating experience for a lot of my colleagues who have attended.
Steph Douglas is a previous guest on the podcast, really fascinating gentleman, and he's done a lot of support, I know, with women in the fire service, and he says how much he's taken personal development, because again, I love the idea of personal development, because at the end of the day, we're all people as well, so much of what you focus on are things that can actually empower a lot of people, as much as it's important that women see this as a safe space for them to be able to develop themselves. There's a lot of value for everybody that attends these things, I suppose.
Absolutely. And I see that we've got Danny Cotton has joined us in the room. Looks like she's been running or something. Hello, Danny.
Hello, everyone. Sorry I'm late. I was out for a walk and then I have to stop and put a fire out. She'll be very amused by the fact that I can't help myself.
She just cannot stop herself, can she? Smoke scene and she's straight over the field.
So I had to go and rescue someone's front garden from their fence burning down.
Did you try and make them do it? Did you try?
They were running away. They were panicking because there's a load of cardboard light and it was just about to catch light to their fence and some handrails. So I just said, "Oh, just turn your garden hose on. I'll do it for you." And they're like, looking at me like, "What's she doing?" With little bobble hats and their fire out. Didn't have to step up to being a previous firefighter.
Danny, I'd love to, I hope I don't sort of jump on you immediately in this one, but there's been a number of really interesting comments from the rest of the ladies here. There's been a lot of complimentary stuff in and around Nicola. You really complimented Sarah on her tenacity and her stubbornness in her own personal development. Danny, hopefully I'm not wrong in saying that I believe you have a great deal of tenacity as well. But what I wanted to ask you is, for people that aren't naturally tenacious, that aren't naturally driven, that don't feel comfortable raising their hand, even in a small forum, let alone on a national or international stage, or Women in the Fire Service, which is now huge. How do we nurture that tenacity? Do people need to feel like they are fight the power against it all? Because that's really difficult for everybody, men, women, anybody, to feel that they are so driven they're going to go against it. It can be very difficult to nurture that. How have you nurtured that, or how have you supported people in doing that?
I'd say it's incredibly difficult, and I was never very, when I first joined the fire service, I wasn't someone who stepped forward into the limelight. I wasn't somebody who would have stood up and rallied against anything. And I think one of the main things that really supported me was very early on in my career, I was fortunate enough to become part of the women's section of the Fire Brigade Union, which was just setting up in London. And somebody must have said, "I recommend you go," because at the time there were so few women in London. I think there were probably about 50 women out of 9,000 firefighters. Wow. And someone said, "Well, you should go along to it." And now looking back, it was a really big step for me, because lots of men were obviously not very supportive of the idea of women meeting together, and we were going to have some sort of secret meeting and do terrible things. But and interestingly, when they first set it up, you had to have a man present. So you weren't allowed to chair the meeting yourself. They had to send a man along to chair it.
To police
something. It's the funniest thing in the world. and gosh, the chap must have been so bored, because we all sat there talking about things like uniform and, we didn't have trousers that fitted us and the toilets didn't work properly. And he must have just been sitting there thinking.
There's an irony in you saying that, because it's been something that we've discussed today, but I love that you bring it up.
Yeah, so it was, and so for me, that was one of the things that I would absolutely say gave me some confidence, was meeting other women and being supported by them, and knowing that I wasn't on my own in what I was thinking, and there were other people I could reach out to. And it's been a real growth thing for me that, I used to hate public speaking. Just the thought of standing up in front of people would make me incredibly anxious and want to run away. And now, literally, I'll do it at the drop of a hat without any preparation for lines. So it is something that takes time. I don't think pretty few people are born with it, but it is something that I absolutely think support of other people is crucial for. And that's where I think where Women in the Fire Service just gives you a voice, because you meet like-minded people, you meet someone who's walked in your shoes, and that just gives you that extra bit of courage to know you're not on your own. But I think it's absolutely vital for people like me, as I was coming up through the ranks, and especially as a principal officer, to be able to reach out and help people and show them that there is, that this is for them, and you don't all need to be the same, and you don't need to be someone who's prepared to stand up and shout the Oz. You can just be part of that group to give you that support. And I always say to people, if you've ever felt that you've reached out and got support and help, then it's really vital you pay that back. And when you see someone else that you think might need the help, then reach out to them. And being someone who's really promoted women in every aspect of the fire service, for me, the dividends have been when I've seen women who've actually come up through the ranks or got a job. I remember once I was in my local shopping centre in Bluewater, and a woman came running up to say, excuse me. And I thought, you instantly feel guilty, walked out of a shop that I steal something.
Maybe it was the bobble hat. They probably got worried if they thought you'd stolen something.
You should see my hair. So she said to me, I just want to say thank you. And I said, oh, okay. She said, I got in. I was thinking, great, where? And she joined London Fire Brigade, and she'd seen me. She'd come to an open day. And I had a chat with her about how great it was to be a firefighter, and that you didn't have to be a superhero, but you had to work hard. And she got in, she got out to the fire station. She was so delighted, and things like that just make my heart sing, because you think that small impact you have by speaking to somebody and encouraging them can make a world of difference to that one person.
We should never underestimate the effect we have on other people. I always say it's the greatest currency we ever have. They might forget what you did, or they might forget what you said, but they'll always remember how you made them feel. And I love the collection of people we've got in this conversation today, because we all have that own imposter syndrome. And I remember one of you mentioned it earlier, like, who am I? What have I got to offer? Because the person you are now is probably the person you had the ambition to be 5, 10, 15 years ago. But now, because we've been there and done it, it's like, oh, that was nothing really. We're very quick to forget it, very quick to forget how we've overcome those challenges. And people are now at the beginning of that journey, and you have the unknown privilege of being halfway through, or a different place within your journey, and the tremendous value we can add. That's why I think it's incredible. And I just want to pause for a second and thank you all for taking this time to do this, because this is scary. We're all worried about looking silly or saying something that might get us in trouble, or may not be communicated correctly. But we have to step out onto that ledge, otherwise we don't have the power to help people, I suppose.
Definitely.
I wanted to just sort of double click on, you mentioned several things there about lateral development, and we were discussing it with Sarah and Nicola before. One of the things that I found really powerful, we had Beck Meechin as a close friend of mine on the podcast before, and she's a CFBT instructor amongst other talents that she has. And she did a great presentation about the differences in physiology that have an effect on women and how we all respond differently in fire behavior. I wanted to use that as a sort of jumping off point for anybody to sort of open up and talk about how that's an example of other ways that people can get value from women in the fire service. Because a lot of people, Caroline, you spoke about how happy and comfortable you are in your role and how it fits your lifestyle and how you live your life as a crew manager. For people that don't want to go station group, chief, and the dizzying heights, there is still a lot of value from exploring different ways in which women interact with the role of a firefighter and how they can be the best version of themselves there. If anybody has any examples of that.
Yeah, we are talking a lot about the menopause at the moment and about how that might look for the fire service in the future, because we are recruiting and retaining more women until retirement age. And I think probably all of us in this group today have all got our own stories about it. It was a very frightening thought of how's that going to affect me as an operational officer? How am I going to adapt to what is required of me, but how my body's going to change? Because even though women have been in the fire service for 25 plus years, it was still very much an unknown up until I don't know, when was it first being talked about? Probably 4, 5, 6 years ago. I mean, and that was really the first time I'd started hearing about menopause at all in a work context. And it was very easy in my 30s to think, oh, well, that's decades away. And then all of a sudden you're at an age where you're thinking, oh dear, here we are. And I think that's one of the really positives, that we have opened up that conversation, that it is something that male colleagues, I hear them talking about now, because it also, as well as it being so important for us as the female staff, it's also really important that our male staff are taking that information home, and when they have female partners and they're understanding about perhaps what other people in their lives are going through. And I just think it's such a big conversation that really wasn't talked about until quite recently.
I mean, even the physiological side of it. For men, when we talk about hormone replacement therapy, men's testosterone drops off from about the age of 30 and it has a steady decline until your 50s. So it's a progressive thing and you don't really notice it. Whereas for women, from my understanding in my studies, estrogen has a sudden drop. When women enter menopause, it is a very quick thing. It can happen over a number of months, where several ways in which their body interacts with their day-to-day life can change very rapidly. So having that pre-education about it, and how, I've got a daughter, I've got a wife and all that sort of stuff, how the behaviors might change and how we can best adapt for that, because it's not a progressive thing. It can be a rapid change. It can be quite jarring for the individual who's going through that, I suppose.
I think for me, I remember conversations being had when I was in my 30s by people saying, yeah, well, when women get to that age, their bones will just crumble and they won't be able to be firefighters, and there was this absolutely shocking thing that it was as though we were going to write all women off when they got to their 50s because they were going to be completely incapable of completing their role. And I remember a good friend of mine who had served about 2 years longer than me, and she'd reached 50, and she kept saying to people, yeah, bones still attached, haven't crumbled yet, and it was this very much this kind of view. And I think it is a really important aspect that there are lots of conversations, I think, that women are more comfortable with, or that women seem to have an easier time having a conversation about. And absolutely, for me, one of them is, and some of the work that I've done around mental health, because I know just from looking at the stats of, society in general, but the fire service especially, around the likelihood of men of certain ages and certain groups to have a conversation about how they're feeling is, really low. And, we've all experienced in the fire service, people have taken their own lives. And now it is about making sure that people feel far more comfortable about having those conversations. And I absolutely know, if you look around groups of people and groups of friends, generally women will be talking about the things that bother them, men less likely to. They think they need to be strong, they need to be the ones who solve everything. So opening the doors on those conversations. And I know absolutely from conversations I had, with my own struggles with mental health, that lots of my male colleagues, especially the senior ones, came and said to me, I would never have opened up and asked for help if you hadn't been so open about talking about it. And I think that, where we can make those changes, it just has such a far-reaching impact on people. And I think that, I always say to people, when women say to me, promotion's not for me, and I think that's great, because you really need people who are career firefighters, who are experienced firefighters, who are there to mentor other people. But also there are so many different roles in the fire service you can get involved in, from the fire investigation to all of our youth intervention schemes, and there's just so many different aspects of it that being a firefighter has, endless opportunities. And promotion isn't for everyone, and it couldn't be, because we couldn't all be officers, otherwise there'd be no one, doing the really important work. So for me, I think, when people say they don't want promotion, it's fine. I always just want to check that they are not saying it because they are having that kind of, I'm not good enough, or someone's told me I'm not good enough, because there are loads of women who would make brilliant officers, but who have that crisis of confidence, and where we can reach out and support people and give them that encouragement, even to think about it, just to give themselves that courage boost. You don't necessarily have to do it, but just to think you could do it if you wanted to.
I love what you say about the art of having those conversations. I'll be absolutely honest. You've kind of perfectly articulated the whole purpose of the podcast, to be honest. It's kind of like an informal coaching, mentoring thing for me every time I do episodes like this, because it allows me to go deep into my own thoughts and my own subconscious biases and the unknown unknowns and stuff like that. But my sincere hope is that it promotes deep and interesting conversation with, active listening and a lot of open questions, and not all the yes-no stuff that we see so much of, because in the world of technology and social media, there's a real irony between being we've never been so connected as we have been now, yet we never felt so alone. And I have certainly felt like that when I can sit in groups and feel alone. And I only need one or two people that I can connect with very closely and feel comfortable to have a conversation with me. And then I feel listened to. And my sincere hope is that we try and promote more of that in conversations just like this. You also made a great point about the different roles, because there's an irony in that. I see some of the greatest community educators as women in the services that I work in. And the main thing about the fire service is prevention. You know, that is our big weapon. That is our big lever of change. And we've been so successful at it. And the successes that I've seen is because of those soft skills, the emotional intelligence that so many women bring to the role. Some of the best ones are often community educators. And it's not to say that men don't make community educators, but there seems to be a natural affinity to people that choose that role. And they are tremendously successful in connecting with those harder to reach individuals within the communities. So if they feel that, like you say, firefighting isn't for them, there is so many ways that they can add just as much, if not more, value within the fire service. Jules, you made a fantastic point about this kind of wave of change that we've seen in the fire service. We're going through a period now where so many firefighters are retiring, and we haven't seen this in like 30 years. Up until this point, it may have been quite difficult to keep trying to incentivize and keep trying to, create change in the fire service and not seeing it. But now I feel like we're on the crest of that wave, because we're seeing so much recruitment across the UK Fire and Rescue Service. So I suppose now more than ever, and it's a privilege to have you all on this episode with us, that now is really the time to collect all of that together, because if we're going to see a change, I feel like we're going to see it in the next 5 years. I mean, do you see that, Jules? Is that sort of speaking to what you were talking about earlier?
Yeah, I think so. And I think, we spoke earlier about long periods of time without recruitment in the fire rescue service, and most fire and rescue services are now. And I think the way that the recruitment has changed so much more around social media, so much more willingness between different services to learn what's working well in one fire and rescue service and how we can help support that in others. And I would say, and I'd ask others, for their thoughts, but certainly looking at social media of the adverts that have been put together promoting the recruitment, nearly every single campaign focuses around the diverse roles and the diversity of the role of a firefighter, and includes those pushing against the stereotypes that we spoke earlier about, being, white British males, and so many different people. I think someone mentioned earlier about someone who's 5'3", who's the most amazing firefighter, and we all come in different shapes and sizes. And I think through the power of technology and social media, I've started to see that really change in the way that services are advertising and promoting for their recruitment. You
also made a great point earlier about, we speak about firefighting, we spoke about terminology, and I wanted to ask you about those tweaks in language, because I think, Caroline, it was you that articulated, we were speaking about the terminology, and we spoke about fire, and we spoke about firefighting. Would I be right in saying, and again, this might be my own bias, I connect with a number of people from around the world in the fire service, and people like Americans, I don't feel like they have that same challenge. I feel like their general terminology, their general vernacular is the terminology of firefighting. And it might sound a little bit corny, but I actually think it sounds cooler. I often, whenever I describe myself as a firefighter, as in my job is to fight fire. I think it just sounds more interesting. Does anybody else feel that at all? Because whenever I speak to people from around the world, the default there is firefighter. Do we feel it's more of a British thing? I don't know. Danny, you can probably reach back further than a lot of us because you've had so much experience at different levels, and you interact on an international stage. Would I be right in saying that, or am I fishing there?
I think the language of firefighters, I think it's very interesting to talk about the kind of culture in America. And, I have a lot of experience of doing some work with a lot of fire departments in America, and they have a very different attitude and a very different. So to give you an example, we were with London Fire Brigade, we were trying to do some work with a professor in a university who was trying to install more of a health and safety culture in some American fire departments, because they were having a really huge amount of accidents, injuries and fatalities of firefighters in what I would deem to be unacceptable circumstances, so in training interventions and things. And we were trying to do some work to share experience, because we've been doing a lot of work in the UK around, health and safety management. And it was quite interesting, because this guy said to us that the work he'd been doing, that some of the fire departments there, it was such a macho thing to be a firefighter and run into a fire without your tunic done up and all these things. And that even when people were having horrific injuries and dying, they were saying, yeah, but they were heroes.
Yeah.
And it was this very odd balance of the fact that we were trying to say, and they said, but surely when a firefighter loses their life, that's the most terrible thing for the family, the community, and everything else, the work. And they said, yeah, but they died a hero. And they said, wouldn't it be better if they didn't die? And you spent that money, because they said we pay the families out and we put their name up on a big plaque and all this stuff. And wouldn't it be better invested spending the money on education piece and, stopping them dying in the first place? But there was this massive reluctance because the whole firefighting thing is seen as such a macho and heroic and things. And absolutely, all day long, firefighters are heroes. I will never stop saying that because we are. But there is something about trying to, and I remember having a conversation with colleagues many years ago about whether that term stopped people applying for the service, whether it was too much of a barrier. But for me, I think it is more about because people recognise the term, we are still trying to grapple with stopping people using the word fireman and saying firefighter. So I think anything beyond that would be quite a difficult evolution. But it is for me the importance of really explaining what the role of a firefighter is, and even in percentage terms, because I think that I've seen the experience of people who've joined the fire service thinking that they're going to be out the doors all the time on the shiny red truck saving people. And when they're not, they're bored. And it isn't what they joined for. It isn't what they signed up for. And then they're very disillusioned. So I think we owe it to people to be really truthful about the role of a firefighter, about the percentage of time that you are actually operationally involved, and the percentage of the time that you are doing what is now the key role, which is the prevention and education piece, and absolutely the training and keeping yourself safe. So for me, it is. And I know a lot of people do online questionnaires now and online sort of selection processes, but I think there is always in the background the fact a lot of people who apply are connected to people in the fire service, and especially people who've been in the fire service for a number of years who'll tell them a different picture of what a fire service looks like compared to the reality of now.
I think you're absolutely right. It's about changing that narrative. It doesn't mean that we don't go anymore, but we don't want people to be in emergencies every single day. We're always going to go there. No one's going to replace the fire service or the role of a firefighter. That is going to be our role, but that role done successfully means that we still get to go home to our families afterwards. I hate the idea that a hero only comes at the result of somebody dying, which often is so sadly the case. You see these stories written and you go, oh, where does that person work? And they go, oh, no, they passed away. And you think, well, that shouldn't be the cost of lessons learned, which often is what we see. We were talking about PPE. Nicola was talking about PPE and the challenges that were being faced. And you did reference that women in the fire service are now being invited in the sort of development stage of putting this PPE together. And you mentioned that a number of organisations or a number of companies are asking that people have that input. I didn't want to let it go astray without acknowledging them, because I feel like if we acknowledge those that are stepping forward and are incorporating people like women in the fire service into the development stage of the creation of workwear and stuff like that, then hopefully that will perpetuate it and people will learn those lessons. Would you feel comfortable in giving an example of a company or somebody who has reached out and made the effort to try and be part of this change, rather than just making gestures but not actually making that connection?
What she was saying was the National Fire Chiefs Council PPE committee that have invited women in the fire service to have a place on that committee, which is really crucial. And I think that there are a number of manufacturers and a number of people who are involved in the development of PPE, that do now recognise the importance of having the input at the stage where you develop things, rather than turning the kit out, women trying it on and saying this doesn't fit and it's not fit for purpose, because by then it's too late. A lot of this does go way back to a huge body of work that was done in the 1990s about developing a female form mannequin. You've probably had the conversation around that. So it was, it was a project undertaken by a doctor from work for Leicester Fire and Rescue Service, and it involved, I was part of it, it involved going around the country and measuring every woman firefighter, and I think we took 182 measurements from every woman. Did
that feel appropriate? Was it well received?
Yeah, very well received, because it was about making a female form mannequin that you could finally test PPE on against a woman's actual shape. The process itself was terribly laborious, because it meant identifying. So it was everything from, sitting down to standing up to reaching, because there are loads of sets of data around anthropometrics, because, Marks and Spencer's make clothes, Next make clothes, but the difference is around having clothes that fit, enable you to crawl on the floor and reach up without having gapping, and all those various aspects of it. Also, not having clothes that are too tightly fitting, against a range of different sizes of people. So, and obviously in different areas, hips and chest and all those things. So, it's gone back a long time, but it's still taken a while. And I think sometimes we've come up against the barrier of women who've created barriers as well, who don't want to be different. So I've spoken to women who, when they've been doing the sizing for PPE, have said, oh no, I'll just take this one. I don't want to have a special fuss and try the women's kit on. Because that's kind of been ingrained on them for so long about people saying, oh, don't make a fuss and don't stand out. And I've actually seen women who say, no, I'll just wear the men's stuff. Now, so for some women, it does fit them better because they, whatever design their body is. But for a lot of women, it was about not standing out and not being different and not wanting, because quite often it was a special ask to try on the women's kit. So they only had one set of it.
Even though there was a woman stood before them getting measured?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so people are, and that's just, that goes to show about how it's been for so long about women, not wanting to raise their head above the parapet. So for me, it was about, the whole reason I did it was to go out and say to people, this is really important. This is about our safety. This is absolutely what we're entitled to. We're not asking for special treatment. We just want something that's going to fit us and protect us. And while I was out there, we were doing asking lots of questions on questionnaires. And there were some terrible stories. There was one woman who had particularly small feet. And when she turned up to her training, they'd said, oh, we don't make boots in that size. We'll just give you 3 extra pairs of socks. So this poor woman had a pair of boots 3 sizes too big with 3 pairs of socks and had tripped over and ruptured her cruciate ligament. Jesus. And had to have surgery and been off work for a year. Now, that's a huge cost to the individual and the fire service, because they didn't provide the right equipment. So for me, I kept saying to people that this is why it's important, because it's about your safety and your ability to be able to do the job you really want to do.
I know we had a recent guest, Hunter Apparel. I don't know if you're aware of Simon Hunter. One of the biggest things they're doing is the technology around mapping the individual. So this ironically came about because of COVID, because trying on PPE and stuff like that wasn't very hygienic and potentially cross-contamination and stuff like that. So they had some innovations around the personal mapping of the individual. I'm not 100% familiar with the technology, but I'd love to think that other companies, or maybe NFCC themselves, are looking to develop something like that, because it would take the focus off those that perhaps are part of a station and or a watch, who then may have to feel like they go through the awkward sort of interaction of being measured in front of 9 men because they are different and or other and or I think that might be something. Sorry, I think I interrupted.
No, I was just going to say I took part in the recent Kent-led PPE project, BioFit, about 4 or 5 years ago. And a bit like Danny was saying, I thought I was going to be sort of influencing and going to talk to people. But in fact, I just ended up doing a load of ladder drills and rolling hose in the different sets of kit. Came as quite an unpleasant surprise, I can tell you. So, be careful what you volunteer for. Is the
Yeah, they always say the tragedy of a volunteer. I've got a great opportunity for you. That's always the role, isn't it? That's always the line that gets delivered.
Well, I was part of measuring in the 90s, and my overarching memory of that is see-through shorts. Tiny see-through shorts that we were asked to wear so that we could be measured, and then sitting down and just seeing how much your bottom spread whenever you sat down, and that was measured, because obviously the seat of your trousers needed to be that wide. That was very interesting. Always volunteer for stuff you just don't know what's going to be around.
I think it was the first time I met you, Danny, was when I was required to wear a pair of those white shorts.
They wanted every woman to wear the same clothing to be measured in, and a man, had gone out and just bought a whole load of white. They were like kind of plasticky, shiny
nylon, yeah.
And all these women were turning up, and of course, wearing various different coloured underwear. One woman, bless, had no underwear on, which was really awkward. And you just think they're all turning up to sit in this, and it was awful. And we did sort it out and get some decent kit in the end. But we were out on the road before we knew. We got to the first place. It was like, and it did result in, and it caused a problem with the actual project, because some people complained, and then the union got involved, and it did. it did sort of, put it on hold for a while. But it was. But that whole thing, so your bottom standing up, your bottom sitting down. You can imagine lots of people like, really? What do you want to? And there were some guys on the measuring team, and people were like, well, this is really uncomfortable. And that's why we tried to draft in some more women. But yes, it was a very strange experience. And some services didn't support it. So quite strangely, we turned up some fire and rescue services, and we'd asked them to release all of their women firefighters so that we could, encourage them to come in to do it. And some services we got 2 or 3. Some we got, all of their women. And it was very much a different response across different services. And that was led by the officers who were supposed to be managing it. And I remember having conversations with someone saying, why haven't you done this? Oh, we don't think it's really important.
Wow. I bet they didn't put that in an email.
Of course they didn't. All face-to-face meetings. I had very good images of women in see-through white shorts and black underwear.
I would like to acknowledge that's 20 years ago, so I'd hope that if that request went out today, it would be very...
25 years ago. And it was, the outcome was great. We produced a data set. It was used to make a female form mannequin, and it has helped to shape the future of looking at women and getting proper PPE. So, a small blip. But unfortunately, people will always, I will always remember that part of it, but people don't often talk about the outcome, they talk about the shorts. But the outcome was very positive. I think that, that lots more women, they do make sure now when they do any trials on PPE that there is a proportion of women that take part in the trials. And they also try and make sure they have a really good proportion of varying body sizes for men because, male firefighters are as, diverse in their body shapes.
I've not had anything fit me very well, and I'm not. This is not a pity party. Don't want the little violins coming out. I've never had anything fit me very well. I'm 6'5", 19 stone, and I've just been told many a time, "Oh, your arms are a bit long, and your chest doesn't match your hips, and all this sort of stuff." And I was like, am I supposed to apologise for it? I'm not quite sure. I'm and I'm sure this is only a very small level in comparison to how I'm sure a lot of women would have felt. But I was made to feel very uncomfortable and like I had done something wrong by showing up in the shape that I am.
and I think that really sums it up, doesn't it? It's about being different and being made to feel uncomfortable through being different. And I think that, it's not exclusive to any one group of us, but you can realise how that, if that carries on over a range of things or a range of time in your career, it can make you feel really insecure about things. And then you don't want to ask for something that is, well within your right to have because you're made to feel awkward about it. And I remember when they brought in some new range of kit and they decided that very tall people and very short people just wouldn't be allowed to wear it. I think it was gas type protection. Yeah, you're too tall, too small, you can't do that part of your role.
That's the, when I joined, when I went through the selection process, the height restriction was in place. So you had to be between 5'6" and 6'3". And my understanding is that was because if you were smaller than 5'6" and taller than 6'3", you wouldn't fit. You wouldn't be able to see through the vision panel in the chemical protection suits that were on the appliances.
I thought the 5'3" was to do with reaching some of the ladders as well on top of the appliances. Because this is before we had the suspension drops, wasn't it? I don't know. I may be reaching there. I thought that was an aspect as well. Jules, you mentioned a really important thing about facilities. And I think it's really important because a lot of fire services are getting to a point now where they recognise a lot of their stations are on their last legs. And it also echoes back to a conversation with, I'm sure you're aware of Josephine Reynolds. She's an author of an impactful book in this sort of section. And she spoke about when she first joined, how she just had a curtain in the locker room. She had a curtain on each side of her locker and it would regularly be pulled back midway through her changing process, and how she built a tolerance for it, but how nonetheless it was very inappropriate. I wanted to ask about, so at my local swimming baths, we don't have male and female changing rooms. We just have full unisex, where it's a series of lockers and a series of changing cubicles. I'm sure this is a conversation that has been had at length, and I apologise for my ignorance in this section. Is that not something that could limit the requirement for space? Because we spoke about how limited some of the, some of the grids on these station grounds are. Is that inappropriate still, or is that something that people feel would be a go-between or even appropriate? I just see it as something that works in other parts of society.
I think in some circumstances, yes, and others, no. I know that Nick mentioned it earlier around like the unisex, and we'll use the example of the swimming pools where you just get into a cubicle and, and you have some personal space. And And some workplaces, it doesn't matter whether it's gender specific. Everybody has a right to have, a shower on their own and, go to the toilet on their own.
Yeah.
But I don't know so I know that some of the discussions that we had around the potential to differentiate between the percentage of men versus women firefighters, you could actually move the locker rooms on a temporary basis. I mean, I don't know what my colleagues will say, and I don't know that I can articulate it really well at the moment, but the thought of having purely unisex facilities on fire stations, I don't think would improve the personal space for our women, because the vast majority of our workplaces are still predominantly male dominated. And we spoke earlier about cleanliness, etc., etc. I just don't know that women would get the respect that they deserve. And we spoke earlier as well about when you're in the majority, it suits most people. And I think this would be an example where it would suit most people and not all. But I don't know whether others have other views.
I think from my point of view, if you had the template to build and design a fire station from scratch, an ideal world, and I've seen some in America that are proper ideal world because they've got money and space, you'd have an individual sleeping, changing and washing space, like an ensuite, like a hotel room for everybody. Then it's perfect because you've got your space, you can lock the door and you're safe in there. And that is still a really important issue around safety for me, for people being able to feel safe to get changed. I laugh about Josephine. She was lucky she had a curtain. I changed in a locker room full of men with no curtains. It was just a locker room full of men and I had a locker. So there was no segregation, no separation when I first joined. So, I've seen the evolution. And the other thing for me is that, and it depends on the station. So a lot of the stations, the locker rooms are built in with sleeping facilities. So that makes it difficult as well. And I think sometimes you have to recognise that people they still feel a bit uncomfortable and isolated. When you go to a swimming pool, you're in a large scale area, you're in, you're out relatively quickly, but the locker rooms and dormitories on fire stations are something you might spend a period of time in. And I think that, even when I was an officer, when I was an officer on a watch and I shared a locker room with 3 other officers who were men, but we came at change of watch, we came to an agreement about not just barging into the changing facilities, but it is ideal for anybody. And I think body consciousness isn't a issue to do with gender necessarily. There are lots of guys I know who really would rather not take their clothes off in front of people and not shower in front of people.
Yeah.
I think part of the problem is that a lot of fire stations are very old estates. Lots of money would need to be spent to make them ideal, and we could all design a template from scratch. But I think we are doing that, but lots of people are doing lots of different things depending on what sort of suits them. But I'm not sure that necessarily everyone gets a voice in what would really work for them. But we also have to recognise that even, groups of women will differ very much about what they want. When we first went from having mixed dormitories, so when I first joined, I slept in a dormitory full of men, did do for many years. When we first segregated it and gave women separate spaces to sleep, lots of women didn't want to leave the mixed dormitories because they felt that's where the chat went on. That's where people went, they were in the locker rooms, in the dormitories together. And by putting a woman on her own, she then became terribly isolated.
Yeah.
And we did have a lot of distance from older women who'd found a pattern and found it all right and had settled in. Whereas, some of the newer women coming in and seeing a dormitory and saying your bed's in the middle over there were just horrified. So, it is about recognising that it's a journey we're going on, and we need to take everyone with us.
It's such a narrow sort of tightrope to walk, isn't it? That's why I think, like you say, it's an ever-evolving journey, and we need to keep leaning in and being conscious of it. I've really loved this conversation today. I mean, I just want to thank you all, Caroline, Danny, Sarah, Jules, Nicola. It's been really eye-opening for me. I would hate to leave it here. I'd love to know, and we're going to drop it in the notes below. For anybody that, God forbid, it's the first time they've heard of women in the fire service, I know you've got a Facebook group, and we're going to drop a link into that in the notes below. But what's the best way for people to reach out if they want to learn a little bit more about women in the fire service?
So we've got a great website, Women in the Fire Service website, with lots of information in there. And from there, you can get access to support through emails, etc. But yeah, we do have a Facebook. It's a closed group, but how you can get into that would again be through the website and asking to join the group. We do have, a number of us are directors. We have regional and local reps. So we aim to have a Women in the Fire Service representative from each of the fire and rescue services up and down the country. But if people are not sure, we've got some amazing administrative support. We've got a communications and marketing manager. They're just the only 2 paid members of staff that we have, and they are brilliant conduits in order to encourage people for that communication. But I would suggest that the Women in the Fire Service website would be the first place to go to.
Wonderful. I love that, Jules. Thank you. Sarah, as our host for today, I will hand back to you, good self, for any closing points.
Thank you very much for listening today. It's been a real pleasure to take over the Firefighter podcast. Please visit our website and we would love to see more of you.
Hey everybody, Pete here, just jumping back in. Well, wasn't that great? I think it's so valuable to get the insights and hear the voices of the people that are on the front line trying to make these changes. Because without hearing the authenticity from them, you really don't know what you don't know. It's that unknown unknowns, isn't it? We can so easily fall prey to our own subconscious biases. If we don't give the opportunity, we don't give the platforms to the people that really are experiencing it, then we are never really going to know how it feels. So I hope today's episode has left you feeling inspired. I hope you feel curious to go on and find out a little bit more about women in the fire service. And just as firefighters in general, hearing Sarah, Jules, Nicola, and especially, Caroline, Danny Cotton, for goodness. Some of the challenges she's faced in her career, I think, would have gotten the best of many firefighters. If you have enjoyed today's podcast, please do everyone a favor and share it. Don't be selfish. If you have taken some value from it, if you are still listening now, then that shows you must have enjoyed it a little bit. So please hit that subscribe button and please share this into your WhatsApp group, share it into your Facebook group. Let's try and spread the message and share the work that is being done in Women in the Fire Service. And who knows, maybe you will inspire the next Danny Cotton. Maybe you'll inspire the next Jules King. You have the power in your hands to do that. So until next time, I will pass the torch to you, see what action you take with it, and I hope one of the actions is to come back and join us again as we delve further into the world of the emergency services and all the incredible people that operate within it. So thanks for dropping by. Look after yourself, support your emergency services wherever you are in the world, and until next time, stay happy, stay healthy, stay hungry, and I will see you all real soon right here on the Firefighters podcast.